I have collected more than 100 shocking historical photos. Write in the comments which photos you like the most. In December 1968, Gary Stephen Christ kidnapped 20-year-old Barbara Mackle and buried her in a ventilated box while demanding a $500,000 ransom. She survived 83 hours underground. Christ served only 10 years of a life sentence and later briefly practiced medicine in Indiana. In 1933, New York's Murder Trust insured Michael Malloy, then repeatedly tried to kill him with alcohol, poison, freezing, and a speeding taxi. After surviving every attempt, he was finally murdered with coal gas on February 22nd, all for the insurance money. Salvo the Paradog descends by parachute during World War II training when military dogs were prepared to accompany airborne troops. The animals carried messages, located mines, and guarded positions after landing, sometimes deep behind enemy lines. On March 30, 1944, American carrier aircraft attacked the Japanese destroyer Wakatake north of Palau. The warship sank with 88 crew members, leaving only 17 survivors. Between 1929 and 1934, Fascist Italy killed at least 20,000 Libyans. It deported half of Cyrenaica's population to concentration camps, where mass graves still reveal the crime. German troops reached the outskirts of Stalingrad in August 1942. The battle that followed trapped an entire German army and killed or wounded nearly 2 million people. This is the last known portrait of Edgar Allan Poe, taken in September 1849. Days later, he was found delirious in Baltimore and died at 40, with his cause of death still unknown. During the 1962 El Porteñazo uprising in Venezuela, priest Luis Padillo held a dying soldier under sniper fire. Hector Rondon captured the moment, winning the 1962 World Press Photo of the Year. Paramedics performed CPR on Owen Hart after he fell 78 feet into the ring during a live show in 1999. The audience thought it was part of the act, but Hart died from his injuries. In 1898, a man sat inside the massive hollow tree in Canada's Stanley Park. The ancient western red cedar was so wide that people, cars, and even elephants posed inside it. After surviving a day in orbit in 1960, Soviet space dog Strelka gave birth to 6 healthy puppies. One puppy, Pushinka, was later given to President John Kennedy and had puppies at the White House. Henry Cooper gave Muhammad Ali the hardest knockdown of his career in 1963. They later became close friends and exchanged Christmas cards for decades. On July 28, 1976, a massive earthquake struck Tangshan while the city slept, flattening most buildings. About 242,000 people died, making it one of the deadliest earthquakes ever recorded. London police arrest a suffragette during the Constitution Hill riot on May 21, 1914. The clash followed Emmeline Pankhurst's march toward Buckingham Palace, and 66 women were arrested. In 1911, the fishing vessel New England became completely encased in ice off British Columbia. Its crew posed on deck beside huge layers of frozen sea spray. In November 1917, a wounded Canadian and a wounded German shared a cigarette in Passchendaele's mud. Moments earlier, they had been enemies. In 1932, roughly 200 homeless men lived inside unused sewer pipes in Oakland. The pipe company allowed them to turn these concrete tubes into a settlement called Pipe City. In 1916, an Austro-Hungarian soldier descended into the Ice City, a secret tunnel network beneath the Marmolada Glacier. Soldiers lived and moved inside the frozen maze, hidden from Italian artillery. In 1936, Russell Lee photographed the scarred hands of an elderly Iowa homesteader. The image turned decades of brutal farm labor into a record no face could match. In 1925, a prohibition agent poured seized alcohol from a window. One determined man below caught the illegal drink in his cup. Hiru Onoda hid in the Philippine jungle for 29 years, believing the war was still active. In 1974, his former commander returned to formally order him to surrender. Verna Haffer captured firefighters battling the Tacoma Hotel blaze in 1935. The landmark was completely destroyed, yet all 128 guests escaped alive. In 1969, engineers stopped the flow over American Falls for 5 months. Crews examined the exposed rock and discovered thousands of coins and 2 bodies. Ashbury Benjamin developed vitiligo as a child and became a popular sideshow performer around 1880. He later boxed William Henry Johnson in staged comedy matches and toured with Barnum and Bailey. In 1930, a London police officer judged an ankle competition while the contestants remained hidden behind a canvas screen. Only their ankles and shoes were visible, ensuring the winner was chosen on legs alone. In 1994, a young fighter aimed his rifle through shattered glass during the siege of Sarajevo. The siege lasted nearly 4 years and killed more than 11,000 people. In 1985, Philadelphia police dropped a bomb on a home occupied by the MOVE group. The resulting fire killed 11 people, including 5 children, and destroyed 61 homes. Youths confront British soldiers in Derry minutes before the Bloody Sunday shooting. On January 30, 1972, British paratroopers killed 13 unarmed civilians, while a 14th later died from his injuries. On Bloody Sunday in Selma, an officer stood over unconscious civil rights activist Amelia Boynton. Police had attacked peaceful marchers with clubs, tear gas, and whips. Around 1885, Native American children ate together at the Albuquerque Indian School. The school was part of a system that separated indigenous children from their families and forced them to abandon their languages and cultures. In 1935, American girls wore respirators to survive the Dust Bowl's choking clouds of soil. The dust caused breathing problems, ruined farms, and forced millions to abandon their homes. Russia, around 1941, a peasant woman waits beside a train, carrying her child and a metal food can. Millions of civilians faced hunger, forced evacuation, and brutal winter journeys during the German invasion. A massive crowd fills Zagreb on May 12, 1945, celebrating the end of the war in Europe. Just days earlier, Yugoslav forces had entered the city after the German-backed regime fled. Douglas MacArthur was furious when the shallow landing boat forced him to wade ashore and soak his trousers. After seeing the dramatic photograph, he embraced it, while rumors claimed the famous landing had been staged. A Serbian veteran of the Salonika Front salutes during Tito's farewell ceremonies on May 6, 1980. His medals mark service in one of the First World War's toughest campaigns. Ewart Skoniers had failed flight school, yet guided this shattered B-17 back to base and saved its crew. He was later captured, became the last prisoner to leave Stalag Luft III, and died in captivity. On November 10, 1938, residents of Siegen watched their synagogue burn after Kristallnacht. Firefighters protected nearby buildings, but deliberately left the synagogue to the flames. In 1928, Delaware fishermen piled thousands of horseshoe crabs to grind into fertilizer. This mass harvest lasted for decades and severely damaged a species that has survived for more than 400 million years. A military checkpoint stops drivers in Warsaw during Poland's martial law in 1982. The crackdown killed dozens and sent nearly 10,000 people into detention. In 1872, the Holterman specimen weighed 286 kilograms and contained about 93 kilograms of gold. It remains the largest single mass of gold ever discovered. This Victorian rocking bath promised the health benefits of sea bathing by boosting circulation. In reality, users risked motion sickness, getting trapped, and swallowing dirty bathwater. This Nuremberg prison corridor held the highest-ranking Nazi war criminals during their trials. American guards watched every cell around the clock to prevent escape, violence, or suicide. This Hungarian gas mask from 1939 contained a microphone linked to a chest-mounted loudspeaker. It let officers shout commands clearly during a chemical attack without removing their masks. In 1969, A helicopter carried this Futuro house high above the railway on its way to Dombey. The Finnish flying saucer later became the mountain resort's famous Tarelka Hotel. Windber, Pennsylvania, faced total chaos after the flood of July 19, 1977. Mud buried streets, wrecked cars, and left residents clearing debris where their neighborhood once stood. A wrecked Citroën lies in a Paris street during the May 1968 uprising. Nearly 10 million workers joined nationwide strikes, bringing France to a standstill and pushing President Charles de Gaulle into its greatest political crisis. In 1907, Grace Oakeshott faked her death and fled with Walter Reeve, apparently with her husband's knowledge. They settled in New Zealand and had 3 children before Grace died in 1929. In 1871, Paris rebels seized the capital and created the Paris Commune. Just 2 months later, government troops crushed it and killed thousands during Bloody Week. Italy converted the liner Roma into the aircraft carrier Aquila, but she never entered combat. Germany seized her in 1943, Allied raids crippled her, and Italy later scrapped her. In 1960, a United Douglas DC-8 collided with a TWA Lockheed over New York City. The planes crashed in Brooklyn and Staten Island, killing all 128 people aboard and 6 people on the ground. In 1969, a Vietnamese woman escorted a captured American soldier through the jungle. Thousands of Vietnamese women served as armed fighters, scouts, and prison guards during the war. Police stormed student barricades in Paris's Latin Quarter in May 1968. The violent clashes helped ignite nationwide strikes involving nearly 10 million workers. André the Giant's body was flown from France to the United States because no French crematorium could accommodate him. His ashes were scattered across his ranch in North Carolina. These Bevan boys were conscripted to mine coal at Markham Colliery in 1943. Many had never seen a mine before, but Britain urgently needed fuel for the war. Jolly Marie, weighing 280 kilograms, won Luna Park's Big Girls Contest on August 24, 1925. Her prize was $25 and a season pass, which she used to ride the park's attractions. On October 21, 1967, anti-war protesters confronted military police outside the Pentagon. More than 600 people were arrested as thousands demanded an end to the Vietnam War. In April 1953, this 100-year-old woman was photographed grinding coffee by hand in her Pittsburgh kitchen. Born around 1853, she had lived through the American Civil War. In 1919, Boston police used an ambulance to haul away seized political literature. The raid came during the first Red Scare, when authorities targeted suspected radicals. A crash landing erupts into flames aboard USS Enterprise in 1944 as crewmen race past parked aircraft. Carrier crews faced fires, spinning propellers, and fuel explosions during every combat mission. Red Army soldiers ride an IS-2 during the Battle for Gdansk in March 1945. The fighting destroyed much of the city and killed thousands of soldiers and civilians. In November 1944, a Filipino nurse comforted a badly wounded American soldier inside Palo Cathedral on Leyte. W. Eugene Smith captured the church-turned-hospital after Allied forces landed to liberate the Philippines. Soviet soldiers posed beside one of Afghanistan's giant Bamiyan Buddhas during the war. The statue survived for centuries until the Taliban destroyed it with explosives in 2001. Francis Bacon's London studio was photographed in 1988 with thousands of paint-stained objects covering every surface. After his death in 1992, the entire room was moved to Dublin and rebuilt exactly. Born with brittle bone disease, Charles Gance became a famous American sideshow performer. He also built a fortune through livestock, real estate, and his own traveling show. In September 1917, Boy Scouts demonstrated gas masks designed for chemical warfare. Their bizarre equipment shows how poison gas turned even civilian training into preparation for a terrifying new kind of war. The Edelweiss pirates were German teenagers who defied the Nazis through forbidden music, street fights, sabotage, and sheltering deserters. Branded criminals for decades, they were officially recognized as resistance fighters in 2005. On March 18, 1871, the Paris National Guard built this barricade during an uprising against the French government. The revolt created the Paris Commune, which ruled the capital for just over 2 months. On October 22, 1983, Secret Service agents rushed President Reagan from Augusta National after gunman Charles Harris seized 7 hostages. Harris demanded to speak with Reagan, who had been playing golf nearby. In 1944, oil towers crowded Long Beach, California, with wells rising beside homes and roads. Photographer Andreas Feininger captured how the massive oil boom transformed the city into an industrial forest. In 1963, the Soviet Union launched Altai, one of the world's earliest automatic mobile phone systems. Its bulky car phones connected doctors, officials, and security services wirelessly decades before smartphones. Johann Lehner raises his hands after being captured by Freikorps soldiers in May 1919. Moments after this photograph was taken, the same troops shot him dead. These black prisoners were leased to harvest timber in Florida around 1903. Southern states used false arrests and brutal prison labor to force many black Americans back into unpaid work after slavery ended. Carolina Olson reportedly fell asleep at 14 and stayed bedridden for 32 years. When she woke in 1908, she claimed she remembered nothing after her childhood. NATO bombed Serbia's state television headquarters on April 23, 1999, killing 16 employees. Most victims were technicians, guards, and makeup artists, while others remained trapped beneath the rubble for days. In 1952, boys watched the government burn their homes at Okahu Bay, the last Auckland settlement of Gariwatua. The families were evicted and relocated, leaving the tribe virtually landless. Miriam Soulakiotis ran a Greek monastery where followers surrendered their property. She was accused of starving and torturing victims, with reports linking her secretive cult to as many as 177 deaths. Union aeronauts inflate the Intrepid, a hydrogen balloon used to spy on Confederate forces from above. It was Thaddeus Lowe's favorite among the Balloon Corps' 7 aircraft. In 2003, a polar bear approached the surfaced submarine USS Connecticut and began licking and pawing its rudder. After deciding the strange metal object was not food, the bear walked away. On March 19, 1952, the 1 millionth Jeep rolled off the production line. Workers celebrated the milestone just 11 years after the vehicle entered mass production. A worker presents finished Valenki to a factory clerk in the Soviet Union during the 1920s. These winter boots were shaped from compressed wool without a single seam. This photo is said to show a giant pike caught in Russia's Lake Ilmen in 1930. Its exact size was never reliably documented, turning the famous catch into a fishing mystery. On May 1, 1935, the giant Maxim Gorky flew over a military parade in Moscow's Red Square. It was the world's largest land aircraft, powered by 8 engines. Producer George Pal reveals the Martian prop created for the War of the Worlds in 1953. Its single eye had 3 colored lenses, allowing the alien to see red, green, and blue. These weapons were linked to Lincoln's murder and Major Rathbone's stabbing, and the display even includes the bullet removed from Lincoln's head. Booth wore these boots on the night of the assassination. At 9:38, a Japanese mine exploded beneath the Russian battleship Petropavlovsk near Port Arthur. The flagship sank in under 2 minutes, killing Admiral Stepan Makarov and more than 600 sailors. A snake charmer faces a hooded cobra in India in 1907. One wrong move could mean a fatal bite, while a crowd watches from just a few feet away. On March 20, 1944, 2,500 women rushed a Chicago department store after 1,500 alarm clocks went on sale. Guards were trampled as wartime shortages turned shopping into chaos. In 1918, the Spanish flu filled emergency hospitals with endless rows of beds. It killed at least 50 million people worldwide, with many victims dying within days. On June 6, 1944, Allied troops stormed Normandy under deadly German fire. The invasion opened a Western front and began the liberation of Nazi-occupied Europe. During the Great Depression, enormous dust storms swallowed entire towns across the Great Plains. Years of drought and damaged soil forced millions to abandon their homes. On March 21, 1926, Franklin Roosevelt helped reel in this 500-pound Atlantic Goliath grouper in Florida. This massive predator can swallow small sharks whole. A ferry battle gunner photographed German soldiers fleeing after his pilot strafed their convoy. Look closely above the right side of the tail, and you can see them running across the field. Police struggle to hold back Beatles fans outside Buckingham Palace on October 26, 1965. Inside, John, Paul, George, and Ringo received their Member of the British Empire medals from Queen Elizabeth II. On March 21, 1926, floodwater stranded hundreds of motorists across New Orleans. Cars sat half-submerged in city streets as residents used canoes to get around. This is one of the last photos of Devil Anse Hatfield, leader of the Hatfield and McCoy feud. Taken on January 3, 1921, it captured him 3 days before pneumonia killed him at 81. An Albanian woman cries as her uncle's home burns in Stitarica, Kosovo, on February 22, 1999. Serbian forces had surrounded and shelled the village before setting the house on fire. A Hungarian woman holds a captured Mosin rifle during the 1956 Battle of Corvin Passage. Behind her stands a massive Soviet ISU-152 assault gun knocked out by her group. The blizzard of 1996 buried parts of the East Coast under more than 4 feet of snow. It killed over 100 people and forced the federal government to close for days. On March 24, 1928, a Navy plane slammed into a house in Quincy, Massachusetts. The impact crushed the aircraft into a tangled mass of metal against the building. German troops line a street in Soviet Ukraine during the invasion of 1941. Behind them, a ruined shop still carries a sign advertising fruit and vegetables. In 1963, Valentina Tereshkova returned to Earth after becoming the first woman in space. She ejected from Vostok 6 during descent and landed separately by parachute in Russia's Altai region. In 1946, flames tore through the Rialto Theater in Allentown, Pennsylvania. Firefighters blasted the burning building with water as crowds watched from just yards away. On February 23, 1958, Soviet troops returned to East Berlin after a ceremony in the British sector. A snowman dressed as a customs officer gives them an ironic salute. These Soviet women trained as snipers near Moscow in 1943 before being sent to the front. Their school produced 1,061 snipers and 407 instructors during the war. In 1931, Lavrenti Beria held Stalin's daughter Svetlana, while Stalin and Abkhaz leader Nestor Lakoba sat nearby. Stalin later reportedly ordered his guards never to leave Svetlana alone with Beria. In the late 1960s, Empress Farah Pahlavi inspected a women's school in northwestern Iran. At the time, expanding female education was transforming a country where many rural girls had never entered a classroom. On March 19, 1917, the Australian 5th Brigade Band marched through shattered Bapaume after German forces withdrew. The town was ruined and booby-trapped during Germany's scorched earth retreat to the Hindenburg Line. During World War II, Boeing hid its Seattle aircraft factory beneath a fake town built on the roof. Streets, houses, trees, and cars concealed thousands of workers producing B-17 bombers below. This late 1970s mural in Ethiopia shows Karl Marx, Friedrich Engels, and Vladimir Lenin. It appeared during the Derg, a Marxist military regime that ruled through terror and famine. This Tomahawk cruise missile was launched from an Arleigh Burke-class destroyer during Operation Desert Fox in December 1998. Guided by satellite navigation, it struck targets in Iraq from hundreds of miles away. In 1930, Amy Johnson became the first woman to fly solo from England to Australia. Flying her Gypsy Moth Jason, she completed the 11,000-mile journey in just 19 days. On March 18, 1945, this B-17 landed in Poland with more than a dozen flying fortresses behind Soviet lines. Local communities still preserve the stories of their American crews. On November 16, 1992, 50,000 Israeli settlers protested possible withdrawal from the Golan Heights. Rabin's government had agreed to discuss the territory with Syria. British soldiers pose in German helmets after capturing Cambrai on October 9, 1918. They belonged to the Loyal North Lancashire Regiment and found the helmets while patrolling the city. In September 1979, Christopher Reeve signed autographs at Niagara Falls while filming Superman 2. Still wearing his bright yellow robe between takes, he stopped to meet fans gathered near the set. French shock troops gathered during the liberation of southern France in 1944. Armed with rifles and belts of machine gun ammunition, these fighters helped drive German forces from occupied cities. This behind-the-scenes photo shows the giant mechanical Kong head built for King Kong in 1933. Operators inside the model controlled its eyes, mouth, and facial expressions. Dark fungi are growing inside Chernobyl's ruined reactor, where radiation would kill most life. Their melanin may convert radiation into usable energy, helping them survive in one of Earth's deadliest places. James Odell worked as an oiler and mechanic at the Cross Mountain Mine loading dock. He kept the coal carts and heavy machinery moving through dangerous dirt-filled shifts. A Soviet literacy class in 1931 teaches women who had never learned to read or write. The Lickbez campaign required illiterate people aged 8 to 50 to study basic literacy. Workers steady a 21-inch Mark 14 torpedo at the United States Naval Torpedo Station in Alexandria during World War II. The factory built and tested naval weapons from 1918 until 1945. Soviet leader Leonid Brezhnev poses after a successful hunt in 1970. Hunting was one of his favorite hobbies, and foreign leaders often joined him on private trips. Hungarian rebels burned Stalin's portrait during the 1956 uprising against Soviet control. Days later, Soviet tanks crushed the revolution, and thousands were killed. In 1935, Spanish engineers tested this pressure suit for a planned stratospheric balloon flight. Its airtight helmet and heated layers later influenced the design of modern spacesuits. Oscar Derlewanger was a convicted criminal who commanded one of the most brutal SS units, responsible for mass murder across occupied Europe. In 1945, he died in Allied custody after reportedly being beaten by Polish guards. Shipbreakers dismantled giant vessels by hand on muddy beaches using torches, ropes, and heavy hammers. One wrong cut could drop a steel plate weighing several tons, while asbestos, toxic fumes, fires, and explosions made every shift deadly. In 1912, Yale professor Hiram Bingham led an expedition to Machu Picchu. His daring image later helped inspire the legend of Indiana Jones. A German priest addresses German soldiers and local Ukrainians in 1941. Among the crowd are Hiwis, Soviet volunteers serving the German occupation forces, who translate his speech. On March 18, 1965, Alexei Leonov became the first person to walk in space. His suit inflated in the vacuum, forcing him to release pressure before squeezing back inside. Paris, May, 1968. The Sorbonne Chapel stands behind a barricade of overturned cars and ripped-up paving stones. The student revolt triggered a nationwide strike involving about 10 million workers. A United States combat correspondent holds 2 Colt revolvers found in the rubble during the Battle of Manila in February 1945. The city was destroyed in brutal street fighting that killed more than 100,000 civilians. In 1881, Andrew Watson became the first black footballer to play internationally. Captaining Scotland, he led a stunning 6-1 victory over England. In 1951, Soviet space dogs Mishka and Civic flew aboard an R-1B rocket. They survived crushing forces during the flight, proving that living creatures could endure rocket travel. The Dynasphere was a giant single-wheel vehicle built in 1932. Its petrol engine pushed the bizarre machine to 40 kilometers per hour. Anthony Perkins and Tab Hunter were secret lovers in 1950s Hollywood. They went on double dates with women to protect their careers, then secretly returned home together. Sultan Mehmed VI leaves the British battleship HMS Superb in Constantinople in 1920. 2 years later, the last Ottoman Sultan fled the city aboard another British warship as his empire collapsed. Ground crews unload fuel tanks beside the P-51 Mustang as this trip, necessary on Iwo Jima in April 1945. These drop tanks gave Mustangs the range to escort bombers over Japan. In Hawaii in 1944, MacArthur urged Roosevelt to retake the Philippines instead of invading Formosa. Roosevelt chose the Philippines, giving MacArthur the chance to fulfill his famous promise to return. Workers squeeze inside a B-24 Liberator fuselage in Fort Worth in 1942, installing equipment by hand. Howard Hallam captured the cramped factory work hidden beneath the bomber's metal skin. Emperor Meiji traded court robes for a Western military uniform, but imperial rule remained sacred and powerful. Japan modernized its army and industry while preserving the emperor, social hierarchy, and deep loyalty to tradition. In January 1945, Alexander Marinesko's submarine sank the armed German transport Wilhelm Gustloff, killing more than 9,000 people. He believed it carried troops and could not know that thousands of refugees were trapped aboard. This Spanish M48A1 Patton guarded the Sahara in 1975 as Morocco pressed its claim on the territory. Spain withdrew soon after, leaving the desert to Morocco and Mauritania. Ayatollah Khomeini faces reporters in France on January 17, 1979. 2 weeks later, he returned to Iran after 15 years in exile and reshaped the country forever. Hours before the D-Day jump in 1944, Easy Company paratrooper Pat Christensen stood beneath his aircraft. Dick Winters placed him second in line because he wanted his most dependable man directly behind him. In 1942, a Japanese family left this sign in their Little Tokyo store before being forced into an internment camp. It thanked customers and promised to serve them again. In 1864, Daniel Waldo was photographed at age 102, making him one of the last 6 surviving veterans of the American Revolution. He had served at 16 and survived British captivity. German troops crowd onto armored vehicles during the Axis retreat from Stalingrad in the winter of 1942. Italian soldiers were left behind as the Soviet offensive shattered their army and trapped thousands in the frozen steppe. Marilyn Monroe hugs her trusted makeup artist, Alan Whitey Snyder, while filming The Misfits, her final completed movie. Snyder later kept a promise to Marilyn and prepared her makeup for her funeral. In 1914, Harry Houdini performed a fake mind-reading trick for Theodore Roosevelt aboard the SS Imperator. Roosevelt was so baffled that Houdini later revealed how he had secretly researched his life. In 1997, Saddam Hussein swam in Baghdad's Tigris River to show that its water was safe. His white sun visor made the propaganda stunt one of his strangest public appearances. In the 1950s, an American stewardess checks her uniform against a strict grooming list. Airlines controlled everything from hat position and makeup to hair length, jewelry, and blouse cleanliness. Polish Home Army soldiers guard Lwów Polytechnic during the uprising in late July 1944. They fought to free the city from German occupation before the advancing Soviet army could take control. In 1991, Serbian warlord Jelko Ražnatović posed with a live tiger cub beside his masked paramilitary fighters. The cub symbolized their feared nickname, Arkansas Tigers. In 1993, white supremacist leader Eugene Terre Blanche shook hands with a local Inkatha Freedom Party leader. Their unlikely meeting came as South Africa approached its first multiracial election. On August 8, 1950, Florence Chadwick crossed the English Channel in 13 hours and 23 minutes. She broke the women's record and later became the first woman to swim the channel both ways. Lafayette Escadrille pilots adopted 2 lion cubs named Whiskey and Soda during the First World War. The mascots lived with the American volunteers fighting for France. During World War II, American soldiers climbed the Taj Mahal and wrote their names on its giant bronze finial. The historic monument became an unlikely wartime autograph book. Richard Jenkins photographed workers with a Romford and Evershed steam engine in Pershore during the early 20th century. These machines powered heavy farm equipment, replacing exhausting manual labor with portable steam power. In 1901, a cowboy posed outside his rough log cabin near Hot Springs, Arkansas. Animal hides, antlers, and a sign reading "Hunt Still" reveal how hunting shaped daily life in the mountain wilderness. In Cincinnati in 1915, children raced to devour watermelon slices without using their hands. The contest turned a summer picnic into a messy public spectacle watched by hundreds. At the 1893 Chicago World's Fair, a giant octopus model hung above a mammoth in the Anthropology Building. The bizarre display revealed how early museums mixed science with spectacle. Manchester United faced Wolverhampton Wanderers in the 1949 FA Cup semi-final, but the match ended 1-1. Wolves won the replay 4 days later and went on to lift the trophy. In April 1933, brewery workers stacked thousands of beer crates as legal sales returned after 13 dry years. The nationwide ban itself remained until December. In 1926, astronomer George van Biesbroek used Yerkes Observatory's giant 40-inch refracting telescope to study Mars at close approach. Its lens was the largest ever installed in a working refractor. All 7 British Airways Concordes gathered at London Heathrow on January 21, 1986. This rare lineup showed the airline's entire supersonic fleet, each jet capable of crossing the Atlantic in under 3.5 hours. In 1923, Germany's inflation king wore a suit covered in coins worth 43,000 marks. Hyperinflation had made the money nearly worthless. In 1885, Victor Hugo's coffin rested beneath the Arc de Triomphe before his funeral procession. Around 2 million people followed as France carried him to the Pantheon. I will be glad to read your opinion about these photos in the comments.